Thank you very much. I will add something to the introductions of our panelists. The people who have come here to this stage were invited not only for reasons that have already been mentioned, but also because of the input in the law on the higher education. The inputs was of different types. Madam Degtyarova was the main partner in the team that worked on this law at the ministry level. We were not announcing it very widely, but next we have Piotr Miller, who often expressed recognition for her input. Then Jerzy, head of the International Cooperation Committee, is a leader of this in this work and cooperation with Ukrainian universities. So this subject will also be discussed later on. Then the next participant is Mr. Cieślak, rector of the school, also taking part in the CRASP activities. You may not know that SWPS is no longer a university with the status it had before. It's now a full-fledged university. So I now call it, it's justified to call it the leading non-public university, which proves how important it was to develop non-public higher education in Poland, which was not so obvious back in the 80s and 90s. Now Jan Szmidt, head of the CRASP, at the time when the law was being prepared, he authored and signed, authored the amendments the CRASP made in the law. And as regards, our input, again, you may not know that we have proposed 50 amendments to Minister Miller, shortly before the government bill was announced. 2/3 of those amendments were actually included in the text that was submitted to the Parliament, and that is the highest success rate I remember in all my cooperation with the ministry. And I did have an opportunity to work with all the ministers since the times of Minister Samsonowicz. So we should recognize this work on that law. Well, after all, in 2018, the Parliament, so to speak, ignored further cooperation with CRASP and other such organizations, but the clauses on the representative organizations is very important in the whole text of the Act. So the law actually puts quite a stress on the role of such organizations. So having said that, I will now ask Madam Iryna Degtyarova to tell us about the results of an opinion survey done by the Organization of Polish Rectors, done 2.5 years after adopting of the law. So we will first see what the rectors did think about the law 2.5 years ago. And now, then I will ask the gentleman here to tell us what they think about this presentation, looking at this law from the longer perspective, but looking back. And I will ask them to evaluate the current state of affairs, and later on I will ask them to comment on the question that we have to answer today. What should be the forms and directions of changes to be introduced by the new government, and how much and what they should do, whether it should be revolutionary changes or maybe not. So we will be interested in hearing their opinion on that. But now we are going to listen to Dr. Degtyarova. We have other guests from Ukraine. Madam Degtyarova authored this great comment to the law on the higher education and science published by Walton Clover regarding the internationals of foreigners. She gave her own comment on that part regarding foreigners. So let's hear how much those regulations reflected and addressed the challenges of the new times coming after the outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian war, and how much it was absolutely necessary to amend the law, because, well, we could not predict this new relations between Russia and Ukraine. So, having said that, I'd like Madam Degtyarova, the rectors, to tell us about the law. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor for me to be here among such excellent persons. We had done that survey, and in 2021, and it was kind of an opening work which opened the prognosis of the higher education in Poland until 2030, but the starting point is usually to evaluate the initial moment, the state of affairs. So we've done this survey. You can see in the slide two publications, very important, the key publications. In this study, the first one identified and justified the directions of the law, and that was used as a basis to prepare the questionnaire to identify evaluate and identify the directions. Now you can scan the QR code and see the results. In this report, the forecast, trends and perspectives. Our goal was to get the opinion of the rectors, of the CRASP rectors, their general evaluation and the main directions of changes which were developed during the work on the law, of the Act, and the regulation of the changes that were introduced by that reform. So let's go on.
Here we can see the main areas of the regulation and also the functional scopes, because actually this division is based on the most important directions, the regulation of the system, which consists of different directions of the change, then evaluation and consultation. And we assess them on the scale from 1 to 5. Different universities having different numbers of students participated in the study. So this evaluation represents the views of the rectors in general, and not only the rectors of large or small universities. So the average evaluation of the university area, well, there was not a single area that would receive the score of more than 4 or even 4. The highest scores are that for the university and the higher education and science area, and actually what was going to be impacted by the Constitution for science, that is financing of universities and scientific research, were not really assessed very highly. Well, in the area of university, which was evaluated as with the highest score by the rectors, you can see the statutory obligations, the new university council concept got the highest number of high scores and the lowest number of low scores. Now, research, red and yellow indicate negative evaluation, and so in the majority, the respondents were negative about this area. Now, this is the distribution of evaluations of individual directions. In green, you can see those that were evaluated with the highest score. Well, the status and the autonomy of the university is the best area. And actually, it is 5 years after the implementation of the law. And, of course, the lowest score regards the biggest pains of the universities, that is financing and legal and scientific research. Now, the functional area of the regulation of the system, just as in the individual directions, the regulation of the system, which is related to the autonomy of universities, got the highest score, although generally the score is lower than in the previously presented case. Now, this is the regulation of the system. This is the evaluation and consolidation. Well, consolidation is not only about establishing federations of universities, but also consolidation of the legislation and also consolidation of the model of PhD studies, introducing the subsidies, consolidation of professional ethics principles, etc., etc. So this is the example of how individual sub-directions for each functional area is concerned. Again, evaluation of the research and finances got the lowest score. A lot of hope was related to the establishment of the new model of education, PhD education. So generally speaking, the average evaluation of this law would be a 3.33, so very average score. And, well, the highest score was received by what's related to the status of the university, the rector, the senate, and the autonomy of the university. Well, unfortunately, after this presentation, you can come to the conclusion that the areas that the reform should really concern have not been adequately dealt with. So these are the areas that will require further amendments and changes that are going to be discussed today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In our blue monography, as we call it, you will find more detailed considerations of these matters. Now, in this part of the debate, I would like to draw attention to the fact that the law has also been under a certain pressure related to the elections to the bodies of universities. That happened in the academic year 2019-2020. And some people just rejected the law, treating that as their chance to be elected. And, well, what is also understandable, we had a better understanding of the law. What is criticized is bureaucracy, indicators, etc. I sometimes like to remind people that the legislator has a choice. They can either refer to experts' opinions, like in the case of evaluation, and then there are no objective criteria. It's just the experts' intuition and assessment, or the legislator can refer to objective data, but this leads to the need to introduce indicators. And this leads to more objective comparison between universities, referring to measurable and objective measures. So, let me now turn to my colleagues, the rectors. After 2.5 years, we know how the rectors evaluated the law after 2.5 years. Now 5 years have already passed, and now the question would be, has anything changed in your evaluation? Professor Cieślak, 5 minutes, or 4 minutes maybe. Okay, I will try to follow the suggestion. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to this debate organized by PCG and Polish Rectors Foundation. An opinion has been expressed here that we should not be saying things that are commonly known. Yeah, but sometimes you just need to standardize the knowledge. So a dozen or so hours ago, I tried to update my knowledge about why the discussion regarding higher education is important. Well, it is important, first of all, because it concerns 1.2 million young people. 1.2 million people. 400 universities, 88,000 academic teachers, 22,000 employees of universities who are not academic employees, so altogether 150,000 people. Well, if this is not an important argument, at least it should be an important argument for us. Among these numbers, you should also look at what's been achieved in the period of 5 years. One of the priorities of the law on higher education was related to integration of the operations, integration of the entire system and integration within individual universities. After 5 years, we can say that the higher education system in Poland has not been fully integrated. There are different regulations of public universities, slightly different regulations related to non-public universities. I'm going to give you examples in a moment, but let me give you a very flagrant example. Well, actually, all universities are public because of their mission, but they differ in the way of management. And in this sense, each student is an important student. But students are also important for the future of Poland. When the last subsidies have been distributed for higher education and scientific institutions, it was 14,600,000,000 zlotys to be allocated. Yeah, for 14,600,000,000 zlotys. Out of that, non-public universities got 0.8%, 0.08%. So I don't know whether something like that was in the public interest. Currently, we have 104 public academic institutions educating 760,000 students, more or less. There are 25 non-public universities where 168,000 students get educated. Both types of universities implement the public mission. They combine education of students and research. One of the elements of higher education is supported, well, not sufficiently, but it is supported, and the other one is treated in a very marginal manner, 0.08%. I think this potential could be used. After 5 years, this division of the higher education into public and non-public has been strengthened by the financing mechanisms. The second element that I would like to draw attention to are the federations. There is the initiative of European universities to get integrated with the world of universities in other countries. There are several universities, 7 dozen or so, 25 maybe, Polish universities that get integrated with European universities. However, there is no integration between universities in Poland. We only have 2 federations. Why is it so difficult to find mechanisms for universities to get integrated? Now, we wanted education to be modern and interdisciplinary. Joint studies that were to be the demonstration of this interdisciplinarity play a very marginal role in the higher education. And this is related to several things. First of all, it's hard for public and non-public entities to offer joint education. I mean, studies in cooperation with a vocational organization, only 6 universities out of 400 do that. Studies abroad, well, Jurek Lis is going to tell us more about it, but there are only 13 universities thinking about offering education abroad. Yet another element that I would like to draw attention to there is a mechanism of financing and setting the quality through October is a good idea. I think that another good idea is to evaluate the scientific activity through discipline, not through organizational units. I know that not everybody thinks so, agrees with that, but I think it was a good idea. Also from the point of view of our university. If we're talking about dopes, let me indicate one more thing that shows lack of equality between public and non-public universities. Dopes can receive 2 or 5%, depending on what stage they are. Let me go back to the beginning of my intervention. If a non-public university becomes an e-job, I mean, what part of this, 2% of this amount is very small. We've been selected by the ministry as the company that can get ready to become an e-job. Then we can receive a subsidy amounting to 300,000. This is a new piece of information. We didn't know that. This is something that needs to be changed. Thank you very much. And let me now give the floor to Rector Lis, especially that we have very limited time. Well, within 5 minutes to discuss such an important problem, even in bullet points, very difficult. Well, the second 2.5 years that we've lived with the law is a completely different period than the first one under the law. Looking at the results presented by Iryna Degtyarova, based on statistical opinions, I can say from my point of view, I mean, I'm representing a big public university of a slightly technical nature. I mean, right now, our university is the University of Science and Technology, but it's the university, not academy anymore. So we started offering new services during the COVID-19 pandemic. Then during the crisis, the financial crisis overlapped by that horrible war in Ukraine and the Cold War in the world, changes in higher education in general, all that showed that the opinions that were presented by Iryna Degtyarova are true, and actually the gaps have even become larger. I mean, where the responses were positive, there are even more positive, while the negative aspects have become even more negative. I mean, it seems like the legislators have not been able to predict what was going to happen with the universities. Now, I believe that everything that was related to the system of the university, the general rules or principles to be followed by the universities, I'm talking about public universities here, leaving universities to be autonomous about their internal system. The solutions enabling the positives to be retained at the university and leaving the management, that the state is in the hands of the university management, that has worked. The fact that we can change the structures, even in our HDH, University of Science and Technology, we now have a more matrix-type structure. We are following that blue book, so that has worked.
It has stood the test, and also as concerns the organs of the school, the chancellor, the senate, and the council. The process is a bit different in each of the universities, and the role of its senate. We can say it has already changed, because the discipline boards are now commonplace, and perhaps a little bit outside this law, but in tune with it. What stood the test as well was the certain other elements in the structure. I agree with Romek that the evaluation of the disciplines is the good direction, the evaluation as such. But the solution, especially the detailed solution of the last evaluation, may lead us to a different conclusion. But the system so far has stood the test, and the doctoral schools and positioning the doctoral students in the right position and situation has also been a step in the good direction. Certainly, a good solution was, which goes very much forward, is IDUB. It's a school which is part of this program, and it works very well, especially in these difficult times. They use the funds in a very flexible and efficient way, so that is good too. Now, I have read once again this law to understand it better. Well, it's more than 120 pages of text, but I believe that at some points all that is very much over-regulated, especially the didactic part of it. It should be simplified, this law. It should be put in the hands of the schools like they do in the States, because the good quality of education is not achieved by regulating it. My time is almost over, so we need to make all this didactic part of education simpler, and we have to open more opportunities to work and act outside Poland. And meanwhile, these regulations do not allow it. Another mishap, the absence of a strict clause, a clause that would define the percent of the budget against the GDP. Without this, because that causes all this debate about the inefficiency of the whole system. Then, consolidations of the schools did not work out fine. I got 4 more pages of what actually did not work out, but let's leave that for the next opportunity. So let me repeat. In the second part of this reporting period, even more, we could see even better all these advantages and disadvantages of what we saw at the beginning of the survey presented by Madam Degtyarova. So the polarization, yes, a stronger polarization. Now we will ask our honorary president and president at that time, a CRASP president who was very active in working on that act. How do you see the situation now with this experience you've got? Well, I'm not the chancellor anymore, but I used to be one. Now I can give you the perspective of an honorary member, president. I have more time to meet with the young people, with the doctoral students, especially from the technical universities. So I know their opinions, and as Iryna said, this is the evaluation of the Lord Chancellors. How much that law reached the lower levels of the structures at the university, because it did not reach the lower levels. Certain clauses were not understood properly, like the parameterization versus the evaluation of the university workers. It's not the same. It did not reach the level, the lowest level, that is the institutes, departments, and it did not introduce the task-oriented system of work. People do not seem to be keen on understanding this properly. They have their own styles in implementing the law. And these subsidies were matters which were knocked off the law by Minister Czerwińska and contested by the current Deputy Prime Minister and Minister. He said, well, Mr. Gowin, I cannot do anything about it. So, as a result, the law has an opportunity to start living only if other things follow it and do not and change in the proper pace. The fact that the subsidies of the Warsaw Technical University grew by 0.06 promille, so this is, very, very strange that we are still surviving, right? What was good and what was wrong? Well, first we have to realize that the three main sins. Why was present when the law was implemented and the CRASP was involved in it? There was strong time pressure, the Congress of Polish Science, and produced a lot of material. And I remember that the ministry said, we have no time. If you do not have it done now, this law, you will never have it, and you will get stuck in the old obsolete solutions. The second sin was the fact that at the last moment, when there was no more time to discuss, there was a package added by the trade unions, added to this law, and the minister had to accept it. Otherwise, the law would never be adopted. For instance, certain things were not properly regulated. There were no clauses that would say what would happen if the rector does not reach agreement with trade unions. I was a rector at that time, and I hadn't. Well, I introduced my own regulation, but then there was a dispute with the unions, and maybe it still continues. I don't know. the third important sin was that, realizing all these conditionalities, we decided together with the Prime Minister that by July we would have the first amendment to the law before it's fully implemented, and on the way we would add some more amendments to it, so that as soon when it is actually put into practice, into life, we could eliminate certain weak sides it had, but we did not manage to do so, because the committee I established for that purpose, the minister said we would have to rearrange the whole law from scratch, in fact. So that's why I asked the most experienced person in this field. I asked that person to lead the works of that committee. Now, your time's up, sir. Well, I didn't even start, I was only supplementing what you have not said. Okay, I will just give you an outline. That the amendments have to be done, some corrections have to be done in the law, but we will talk about that later on. Just focus on these 2.5 years. Okay, we do not quite understand the effects of parameterization and evaluation, why so many parameters we have and they are still contested at the community of scientists. Then, we do not understand why this evaluation is as it is. Well, it is a result of certain historical facts. 104 disciplines, 40 disciplines that have to be approved, and then each discipline could have, 3 scientists doing it. So, how can you call it a scientific discipline? Just 3 scientists in it. So, okay, the next thing I want to mention is the passage from scientific research positions into the teaching positions. Oh yes, because they keep saying that rectors are moving people from position to position. But just look at the history, at the point at which the law was adopted. You cannot say to someone who is 50 or 60 years old and was always positively evaluated all the time as a scientist and researcher, but he never did any research. We could not just fire such a person. What could we do in that situation? An excellent idea was that to equalize the 2 lines of academic careers, so we would have scientists and teachers, right? But professor is a professor at the university. But it was possible in that case to allow those people to smoothly move from position to position, but you will not have to confess your any research that you did in the past. You will have an opportunity to speak again. Now, Madam Degtyarova, you will tell us briefly what had to be changed because of the war in Ukraine. Well, the law, as a rule, foresaw the possibility to teach and to study for those who were refugees. But when the war actually broke out, many more problems occurred in Poland, in Polish universities, and on March 12, the law on support to Ukrainian refugees and citizens was adopted. Today, this law has been modified 22 times since that time, but the main solutions it introduced in March and later on in April concerned the possibilities to accept doctoral students and students from Ukraine and from some other countries as students, postgraduate students in Polish universities, and also to accept them as university teachers and research workers. Polish universities could not change the recruitment rules during the academic year, so it was impossible, and that law just allowed universities to change these important rigid regulations, which now allow accepting doctoral students, postgraduate students, and research workers as employees of the Polish universities. It also allowed granting financial supports to those people and access to student loans, which were not possible before. Also, this law, this special law, allowed accepting them without taking part in the competition and without meeting certain criteria that were in place before. Simply speaking, without the nostrification process. But here, internal regulations of the universities are also playing some role, so it was not possible everywhere. So, in fact, that would be all. The main bills, the one from March and April, they did not focus very much on the financial side of this university life, but these things were solved later on. But of course, there were all sorts of new economic effects of the whole policy. Now, what Mr. Lis said, we can see that the universities which had research activities, they were more flexible because they already had flexible money and ways to spend it.
Thank you very much. I can say that once the war is over, we are going to amend the law in order to use the new possibilities of having closer cooperation between Polish and Ukrainian universities. We are working on that and prepare certain recommendations under a Polish-Ukrainian project. Let me now ask the following question. Is the law going to change in a revolutionary or an evolutionary manner? 3 minutes for each of the speakers. So, will we amend the currently existing law, or a new law will be needed? And what should be the directions in which these changes should go? 3 minutes. Well, this time actually is quite long because this is a simple answer. We do not like revolution in higher education. You have to wait for several years to see the effects. So definitely an evolutionary change. Well, there are a number of things that would need to be changed and amended. We somehow have to make the academic community aware of certain provisions mean. Not so long ago, I've heard one of the important persons saying something about the organization of the university, that the law led to the situation in which university departments were eliminated. Well, this is not true. I mean, these are internal decisions of the universities. You know what I mean. Now, as for those doctoral studies, not so long ago, I had again from important representation of PhD students. They have a big problem with getting their PhD thesis in the doctoral school. Well, this is the school that should equip the students with tools. They should gain knowledge there that they could not obtain during the studies, especially interdisciplinary knowledge. And this can get them better prepared for their PhD. But it's not about the school giving them the PhD degree. So new measurement possibilities are offered, for example, in the case of universities of experimental nature. Now, I think that we should also go back to the role of the rector and the rector's function as opposed to the university council. I'm frequently asked, Janek, well, you've been working on that. So what benefits result for the university from the existence of the council of the university? Well, it depends. The university may have more money or better contacts with the university community, and it doesn't. But this doesn't have to be related to the council. An argument given is that the role and authorities of the rector as the person managing the university have increased. No, this is not true. And that's why we have the councils of universities. Apart from senates, there is this narrow group of people that also cooperates and supervises what's happening. So it's just to monitor the rector's activities every day. So I think that, again, this has not been fully defined. I mean, the rector has much bigger responsibility, and that's true. But no, the legislator, in this case, that is the government, wanted to have a small body rather than a huge body operating in a very formal way. So I think that evolutionary changes are needed. A lot of things need to be defined more precisely. And like 30% of the motions that were already prepared should be taken into account. Well, thank you very much. Now, Rector Cieślak, should we amend the law or rewrite it? Well, both. We either need to amend the law, and this can be done fast. But I would like to mention something else. We should work on the strategy of the higher education system rather than the law, because the law should be the consequence of the strategy. If we start the discussion from discussing the law without thinking about the strategy, we're wrong. A big debate is needed on where the place of science and higher education is in Poland. And this debate should also involve stakeholders of universities, not only universities themselves, because actually universities operate for the stakeholders. So we need a debate on the tasks of higher education, its role and financing, and as a consequence of that, we would need the new law on higher education. So I think that this should be an apolitical debate with participation of the representative institutions, of students, PhD students, entrepreneurs. Such discussions should be of technical nature and that they can bring about good results. I don't know whether you know the 10 postulates of Jacek Woźnicki for the future higher education. I fully agree with some of them, like an independent entity and working on the reform. This is the first postulate of Jacek Woźnicki. Making all the decisions related to science non-political decisions. There should be transparency of decision-making process. Well, we are always short of money. I think that everybody agrees with that. But what is important is how we spend the money. And here, again, I have serious doubts as to whether the money has been spent in a most favorable manner for the universities over the recent years. Now, establishment of the Commission for Reliability of Higher Education. This is another postulate of Jacek Woźnicki. We really have a lot of problems in the higher education system. So maybe even independent commission tried to investigate the reliability, scientific reliability of universities would be a good idea. Now, how to shape the paths of academic development. Janek has mentioned the didactic path and educational path. Yes, excellent idea, but this would require appropriate tools. Today we have 72,000 professionals employed in higher education, and the law does not mention their career paths or development paths at all. They are just non-academic workers, and that's it. Okay, the next speaker. Well, obviously, there needs to be continuous development and education, so no revolution. If we're thinking about another revolution or drastic changes and amendments to the system of higher education, first of all, this wouldn't be possible, this wouldn't be necessary, and it would be dangerous, I'd say. And it's not because I'm a conservatist. I really identify with what's happening now, but together with my predecessor, Romek, I've said that Poland needs some vision, the scientific policy, and the policy for higher education. The country doesn't have vision or a concept how higher education in Poland should develop. Whether universities should be public or non-public, should we have free market, or should it be a controlled market like in other countries, like in France, for example, so that universities educate specialists who are needed for the economy. So based on our more or less general visions and the places where we are, the rectors and the communities of employees or PhD students, okay, they do exist, but we do not have the general policy for the development of higher education in Poland. It used to exist previously, right now we don't have any. And it would be important because this would lead to other decisions. As for the law as a whole, in my opinion, it is over-regulated. Although there are also some elements that should be added to it, in my opinion, apart from the first 4 chapters, the law is over-regulated. I mean, the longer you read it, the worse it gets. And what is written about the Poland, it's something strange. I mean, how can you include in a parliamentary act, in a law, what should be included in the Poland questionnaire? The didactics should be deregulated, and also the provision on financing should be changed. I mean, unless we have some budgetary guarantees, like with reference to the GDP, the whole discussion wouldn't make sense. But politically, I don't know whether we would be able to achieve it. I think that there are many places like that, but we also need to take a look at the law as a whole. Jarek, I believe you are the person who decided about the previous law. Half of the things should be removed from this law and others should be reformulated. The role of the rector. I believe that the role of the rector has to be strengthened. Well, you've also mentioned that different employees should be secured. Let me put it differently. I would like the rector, as the employer, to have the same authorities as the rector of a non-public university or the president of Aspects, Krzysztof Pawliński. I like working with him, but, well, I, as the rector, have significantly limited possibilities. So the authorities of rectors should be increased. I mean, there should more trust should be put into the implementation of the law. Well, ladies and gentlemen, based on my experience, I can say that many people ask me to interpret this law. Well, usually we do agree with Director Chaya as to the interpretation, but many rectors ask for something to be further regulated because they don't want to take the responsibility for what's happening at the respective universities. So the majority of rectors will be against the deregulation initiative mentioned by Mr. Liss. So let me just tell you that in the first quarter of next year, we'll have the final report on the development of the higher education. The report is prepared by the Polish Rectors Foundation in cooperation with CRASP, and the title of the report will be the Vision and Forecast. Then, as recommended by the Strategic Commission, we are going to work on part 2 of this report. Then, instead of the vision and forecast, we would focus on the forecast and strategy. So this would be a response to the postulates that have been mentioned here. With satisfaction, I do adopt these because the Polish Rectors Foundation is prepared to participate in this process. I would like to thank the panelists very much. I would like to thank all of you